We really appreciate you guys being here. You just finished a panel on working through a mass fatality, so not an easy topic to talk about. And because not everyone is able to attend every year, we love to do these videos so the people who are interested in coming or interested in the topic have a chance to learn about what you said today. And I hear there were so many questions, so definitely people were very interested in learning about your expertise. Let's start with, given your expertise in dealing with mass fatalities and victim identification, could each of you share a particularly challenging case you've worked on and what you learned from it? And maybe, if it's okay, we'll just go around this way.
Well, I have so many. Since we were looking at different types of modalities, there were wait times for medical records that were 2 to 3 months. That was challenging. One particular case that we had was very interesting because it started with a mistake that was made at the Family Assistance Center, where we had a man that was home alone. He was recovered. His wife and daughter were away. Beautiful STR profile. We thought, wow, we have a family reference sample from his daughter. We're going to get this ID. She did several interviews with the local newspapers talking about her dad, but they just didn't match. And we interviewed her again, or the sheriff's department did, and we found out that she was adopted. And that was not picked up. So that made it a challenging case because we couldn't figure out why this daughter just did not match. But that's a mistake that somebody that didn't know to ask about being a biological parent rather than an adoptive parent.
I can imagine that would make it incredibly challenging.
That happened quite a few times, throughout the incidents.
After that, talking about learning and going on to the next, event, God forbid, but the next event, is there a way to address that then?
Sure,
Yeah.
just in time training. Make sure the people that are getting the samples are asking the correct questions and they understand DNA. They understand to tell the family, we're not going to get an ID if you're not a biological family member. So that's something that we learned for the next incident and carried it on into Maui too. So the next two, we were prepared for that. We weren't prepared for okay, now we have this biological thing figured out, but now we're getting supposed reference samples where the person taking it didn't know how to do it, and our swabs were empty. There's nothing on them. So we'd run them and it would just be blank. So just in time training again. You think you're prepared, and each time you learn something new that you didn't know for the one before.
I can imagine that there's just so many contingencies to think about. It's almost impossible until
you made me pick one. So.
I know. I want everyone to pick one if that's okay. Okay, Mark?
For us in New York City, it all began on September 11, 2001. That was a turning point for the lab and the agency and the city itself on the way things were done. And I've worked on dozens of mass fatalities since then, whether they were in the city or the state or anywhere in the world. It's strange, but New York City, to this day, we will still get calls when something big and bad happens someplace, no matter, can you help? Can we send you samples? Can you send a team here? And I would love to be able to do that, but we're in a city budget like everyone else. We're just a municipal. We're a municipal, largest in North America, but we're just a municipal lab. So generally what we do is humanitarian efforts. We share protocol. And I've always pushed out everything we've learned, whether it was collection of remains, processing and generating DNA profiles, to the software that we've developed that was key, chains of command, working with other agencies, working with nonprofits, all of that. I share it, and the only thing I say is, if you figure a way out to make it better, because there have been organizations that have used the World Trade Center protocol on cases where there weren't a couple thousand, there were a couple 100,000 deceased. and you can't work on that and not learn from it. So it's been great with back and forth and us developing and redeveloping our protocol in New York City. But the 9/11 victims, we will never stop working on that. We will always continue to push that science. We've made the one ID that we've made this year. Well, there were 47 other remains that we've also identified, but they were previously ID'd, so you don't hear about those. We'll continue to push that science into the future, just out of the necessity to make IDs. And one thing that I do with my team that I won't do with any other division I work with or any other type of case, I have my team, the forensic scientists that work on those bones every day in a room with no windows, and just keep going back. And these are kids now. They were in elementary school back in 2001, but I have the families meet them, the families of the victims, which is unheard of for any other kind of case or for a forensic scientist, because I want them to see that people still care. And we give them tours, we bring them to the lab, and we meet with them. We go to their organization and their events. It's been a very powerful relationship. They're supporting us, helping us, because we have about 100 of those victims that we don't have any reference samples for. So we're never going to finish this. I know, I tell the team, like, we're shooting for the end, but we might not have remains. They may have been pulverized, or we might not have a reference sample. But what can we do today to be able to just keep at it? And every year, every month that goes by, we're identifying things that we had no hopes of. The big question, like, Mark, why haven't you finished this? You've taken, like, you're so lazy, you're so slow. You should have. I'm like, we have. But these remains that the guy that we ID'd this year, like 15 times we tried on those remains. They're just so badly burned that and soaked in jet fuel and everything else that we had no hopes of with technology even from a few years ago. So, that push has been, it's defined my career, and it was never supposed to be that way, but that led to forming a missing persons unit and forming family assistance centers. And New York City Missing Persons Day was directly from World Trade Center, and it's helped so many other families outside of that project. That I'm proud of it, proud of the team, and coming to ISHE and seeing all the former members of that team, the alumni that are here this week. It's great.
Wow, I get chills just listening to it, and the tenacity to keep pushing forward. But what really strikes me is, meeting the families. It's really bringing together, there are really people behind all of the things that we're doing in forensic science. And
to this day, we just had the anniversary, and we go down to the Voices of Resilience, their event, and the families are there, and the hugging and the crying and the shaking and the thanking you when you make an ID, thanking you for bringing our little boy home all these years later. But one of the issues that you do see recently is parents of adult victims. So the person died in their 30s, their parents were the one that gave us DNA samples. They're getting up there, and they'll tell me, Mark, I'm not going to be around much longer. I'm getting up there. Do you think you're going to be able to identify? I want to hold my daughter before I die. Do you think you're going to be able to identify? I'm like, that's a complete unknown. I can't tell you how many, who, and they understand. They said, well, we absolutely understand. Will you, if you identify my daughter after I die, will you bury her with me in my grave? I'm like, I can do that, absolutely. That's taken care of. I have a whole list of all the families, the contacts, and their wishes, and we follow that.
Okay, you can't make me cry too early in this interview, so I have lots of follow-up questions to that. We'll come back to that for certain. Julie?
So can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know. Once we start
I'm
going
like,
around the circle, don't worry. We would love to share a particularly challenging case, what you learned from it, or it can also be about the program that you developed in advance of additional events.
So unlike my colleagues here, we've never responded to a mass fatality event. My role on this panel was kind of the preparedness aspect of it, building upon the experiences learned and how certain people responded, the challenges that they met, the challenges that they didn't predict, or the things no one ever thought about. Our role has been to share that information that we've kind of gathered together to try and be prepared, because you aren't ever really prepared. And I think some of the challenges that we came across were we made a lot of assumptions that there were already pre-existing plans in some aspect for the agency or for the medical examiner or for other entities. I just cold called and said, how do we interact if this were to happen? So that was a challenge because they hadn't thought about it, and just getting that conversation started was huge. The other piece was realizing and listening to the types of remains that you could encounter, such as Mark was talking about, that we weren't prepared to handle remains that were really compromised, and to making sure that we started to look at and implement different technologies that would help us in the event something like this happened. We pray that it won't ever, but at this point it looks like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's been very. We've talked about your program before, so it's nice to hear what's going on now and get a solid update about what's been learned from everybody else. Adam, how about you?
So I actually have trouble thinking about a very particular difficult case, and one that I remember is that we kept looking for this guy. We had some evidence, and it came with a list of we're expecting this and that to be there. It's from this location, so it makes sense, and you want to find those missing persons. And I remember one guy was sort of stubborn in the way of not being found, and you always think it's the one I missed. So it's very frustrating, and you try it again, and maybe another way, and maybe NGS, and then eventually, I think, a couple of weeks after all these efforts he popped up, and they found him. Then he popped up again, and then we got a massive more evidence, and again we were that guy. So I don't know if there's a take-home message here. I wouldn't say it will always be the case that if you just let go, you'll find another. I hope things can unexpectedly work out.
And I like the way you talked about trying, different avenues to see what might help NGS and looking at different approaches. All right, so we'd love to hear also, Mark, you touched on this, everybody touched on it to some degree, but coordination across multiple agencies, what are the key factors for success there? How do you prepare so all of the many agencies and other people that you're going to be touching when this happens, and it happens quickly?
So I think the key, really, in my experience, has been working together before it happens, getting to know the other agencies, really finding out what they do, what they understand, what they don't understand, how our agency fit into the whole scheme of things, what they expected from us, which may not be realistic. And just having that rapport, coming to these conferences, meeting people, having that contact, it has paid off so many times as I've gone through each one of these incidents where I could, in Maui, they needed something, I could contact California and say, we need this, they don't have it here, can you get it to us? It's just been so important, and you don't think about that human aspect of, I may need you down the line, or you may need me. You don't think about that. You're just talking. But in training, there's not a lot of training out there, particularly in the medical legal death field, where you can just go and learn how to run a mass fatality incident. There's just not that much out there. So that would be a take-home too. Try and find that training. I've gone in and taught some agencies, looked at their mass fatality plans, tell them where their holes are, what they're doing great, and get them to talk to each other like we were talking to each other before. So I guess that would be the take home from me.
I think that's a great takeaway. What you learn from colleagues and coming together at different events. Everybody's from different areas, different countries, and seeing what you can do together. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, the key is to getting protocol, having that plan in writing, publishing it so other people can see it, and sharing it. And Julie's exercises, tabletops are key to it, because not only do you get a chance to see what everyone else is doing and talk about your plan, and maybe someone has some critiques of it, but you FaceTime. Like, one of the problems I run into, I'm the last of the original members of this team, and everyone else is gone. Everyone else is either retired or passed away from illness. And the people that I work with now, when we have an explosion or a ferry, or even the past with COVID, these are new, and I'm like, we haven't had these tabletops in a while. I don't know these people, and they're looking at me like, what are you doing? You got to reestablish it, and then time is wasting. One of my most interesting of the tabletops was with the military. We were at the National Guard was a part of it, because it was a particularly big. They don't usually tell you what the event is until you get there and you sit around a table, and they said, this just happened. Fire department, what are you going to do? You know, it's within like first 30 seconds. Police departments, Port Authority, FBI, and then you get to the medical examiner's office, which is us, and then they ask you, well, we're getting organized, we're getting ready, we're calling team members. But for this the scenario was a 7-kiloton suitcase nuke goes off in Times Square, levels Midtown Manhattan, and operations were moved to New Jersey and Staten Island. And when they got to the medical examiner's office, I had said, well, we're going to mobilize. And they were like, sir, you're in a 15-story glass building next to Times Square. Your entire department has been killed. You are now a ghost. You will not participate. Just like that, military. You will not participate in this. And I was like, do I still get lunch? Can I still have? So I was like, you're right. I am in a glass building. I'm on the 13th floor of my office. There's no way I'm surviving that. The building's not going to be there. I'm like, it's interesting. Kind of like maybe they can do that on a Saturday when no one is working. But yeah, it was right. It was real life, and it's like very shocking when things start to because all day long. Could be multiple days, but those exercises and the FaceTime extremely important.
What an excellent point. I mean, it seems obvious in retrospect, but, if all of your facilities and people are wiped out, like, what's plan B? Yeah. Thank you. Julie?
There's not too much I can add to this, because I think both those answers really encapsulated a lot that you've asked. If there's only one thing that I can add to that, it is the cadence. It is continuing to practice, continuing to facilitate those discussions with your people. It's like Mark said, you never know which team is going to be there at the time this happens. And so continuing that conversations, continuing to revisit those plans, are they even relevant any longer? We discovered in the last time we went through them that we don't even use one of the technologies that we had planned for. So we need to remove that from it being available. So really that cadence, making an effort, making a purposeful effort, which is hard because we're all so busy. So making that purposeful effort to set aside time to make these discussions happen.
What an excellent point about the technology. I mean, it's changing so rapidly. So
No pun intended.
Yeah, right. So, no pun intended. But yeah, you have to. That changes every plan that you have. Yeah. Adam, anything to add? I know we've covered a lot, so maybe we'll go the other direction next time and give you more.
Well, I don't have much because unlike big guns here, I'm a small screw. I'm an analyst. But like Julie said, that there's usually no time, and you need to make the time. And I wish this would sort of make it to the higher levels. We don't have tabletops. We should. I think the military does. They have a little more time on their hands, but. Yeah, like I know the other agencies I worked with, because we work on a daily basis for criminal forensic cases, but we don't have much going on in the way of preparedness and scenarios, and I think we should.
Okay, thank you. That's great. you all touched on this, and this is probably one of the harder things to talk about, but there is a psychological toll, emotional strain. I mean, whether just in preparing for it, much less going through something so horrific. So, what support systems do you have out there? Do you think should be out there? How do you personally deal with it? What advice can you give in that area? We'll start with you, Adam.
All right. So I think in those cases, or at least my experience from the October 7th events, is that you get a lot of public support, and that's very heartwarming and keeps you going, and you have a sense of duty. But in more practical things that the agency can do. We've had some volunteer masseurs, for example, which I understand would not fly here, but it was, I recommend it.
Yeah, it sounds, but
We've had, foods. We were talking to counselors, and of course, you always feel like I'm busy doing this and there's no time, but it is important, I think. So yeah, we had that.
thank you. Julie?
So I think we had this question, or we addressed this question during the panel. One of the things that I really appreciate is the attention that this field has brought to vicarious trauma. And so I think because that topic has become so important, and realize that no, we may not be going out to crime scenes on the regular. We may not be interacting like a first responder, because I guess technically we're one of the last responders because everyone is gone. That we are nonetheless affected by the things we see and the things we do, and especially an event of this magnitude and what you might be seeing on this. So I really encourage people to look at what their agency has in place. I know our agency has really stepped up their kind of the ability to have counselors, grief counselors, mental health counselors. We have therapy dogs now that are available to come out, and we also have a protocol for even simple homicide. Do the responding officer or the crime scene personnel or anybody that is in touch with that, do they need some extra counseling, and maybe they need to be forced into that? So you really need to look at the resources you have, and if you don't have them, it's important. There are so many publications out there now that you can influence the higher ups to Adam's point. Like there are things that you can show that this is a necessary thing for the agencies to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I agree 100%. We have a wellness committee, full-time wellness committee for the agency, because we do death investigation and autopsies and go to scenes. To have that in place now and go through a mass fatality was so much better off, because it's more of we're in this together. I did not see that on 9/11. We had nothing in place, and there was one morning I'm sitting at my desk, and it was the months after. We were full speed ahead, and it was really the grind. We had another mass fatality within 2 months after 9/11, and it was just pounding, relentless, grinding us. And I had one of my younger scientists was going around the lab, and he used to collect these figurines on his desk. They were expensive figurines, and he loved them, and he would tell you about each one. And he was giving them away, and he put one. He knew that I liked this one. He put on mine. I was like, oh, thank you. He said, I want you to have this. And I thought, like, why is he giving these away? And I would sort of talk to him like, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't feel right about this. I don't know what's going to happen. This kid goes home. So I told my boss, and we brought him in, and we need to do something. So I just contacted NYU, their mental health division, and they were like, absolutely. And they said, this is how we're going to do it, though. If you sit down with one person, you're in New York City, you're tough, you don't need counseling, So we're going to bring the whole division in and put them in a room. And I'm standing to the side, and I'm watching these doctors, and they were like amazing at this. They would talk about like, well, for me, and the doctor would say up on the stage, well, for me, after 9/11, living in the city, going through the smells, and it was like, I had like these kinds of thoughts, and those doctors were like, and I can see a lot of you shaking your head. And I'm looking out in the audience, nobody was shaking their head, but that doctor did that because people are like, oh, okay, it's okay to shake my head. And the afternoon break, they're like, we're going to break into smaller groups, and then the small groups, like sitting around in the circle, they got to talk, and they were sharing it. By then, it just opened up. Everybody was sharing, and quite a few of them took advantage of this free mental counseling one-on-one with those doctors. And I look back, I'm like, that may have been the most important thing I've ever done in like on the World Trade Center, was that, just picking up for like, who do I call on this? But today we've learned from so much, and it's all in place now to help those, that, because everybody's different. Everybody takes these things differently, and we don't want to see no one should bring that home with them. That should stay at work.
What a brilliant strategy by that doctor, but for you to also identify that meant something, and then the way everyone came together to make it a safe space for everyone to do that. And then I hope for you and for anyone who is, a leader in this area, you need it just as much as anybody else. So I hope it stretches all the way to the top.
Yeah, people will ask you, and I know the team here, like, how do you work on this? How do you see that much? Or even like your everyday, like your everyday cases, because you'll see thousands, tens of thousands of bodies in your career, and there are just certain things that you never forget. And for me, I always say, the one thing is, many of the autopsies and the crime scenes and mass fatalities, every time that child is on that slab, or like that I remember every single one of them, a baby versus someone that was shot up in a gang fight, it just, something doesn't sit well. And that's sort of is going to stay with me, for my life.
It's I think it's hard for anyone to imagine what that's like, and support. You can't have enough of it, I think. Kim, how about you?
Well, I think I would probably basically say what Mark just said. In our field, we're expected to deal with grief and work with families and be a really integral part of their grieving process. And so it's expected of us, and we're expected to be strong. And so after the first incident, I knew that my staff would not take advantage of the formal pathways that we had for them where they could get some therapy or some help. So we had the dogs come out. And I think that was just the most wonderful thing that I did out of that whole thing, is scheduling them every week just to sit with the staff that needed it. And they would cycle through, and some of them were coming every week and they really needed it. And then branching off and getting them somebody to talk to that knew what they were going through, worked in the field and had either become a counselor unofficially or officially, and getting them to talk to someone until they would go into that formal. There's just some things that, like Mark said, that will trigger you. Like I don't get upset about things. It's just part of what we do, and you just kind of accept it. But I do remember one time, and it hit me really hard, there's one case where this man had his daughter in the back of the car, and he was racing. He was hopping cars, and had a head-on collision. And the daughter was the same age as my daughter, and they were both in a car seat, and it was the exact same car seat. And the firemen that were out there, I was holding up these two firemen that were just bawling, and I'm just staring at this car seat like, that's my daughter's car seat. And that was more upsetting to me than other things because you make a physical connection or mental connection to it. So yeah, that was just horrible. And those poor firemen, I felt so bad for them. They needed to go to counseling. But that's just, something that we get used to, and you don't keep, if you're in charge of one of these things, watch your people. Know when they're hurting, know when you need to step in and make sure that they need some help. And it's okay to need some help. You don't have to be strong. I mean, there's nothing wrong with me, Laura. I'm fine. But when you ask somebody, they'll say, I'd go to my staff and say, do you need some counseling? Do you think there's something wrong with me? no, sorry. So you have to be inventive and find ways for them to connect until they realize, maybe it's not normal to cry while I pet a dog. That's a sure sign that you probably need to go and do something else. So that would be my answer, I guess.
I love how there. Oh, did you, Adam? Please.
so I didn't mean to cut
no,
you.
please add to it. Yeah.
Just to say that it sort of rang with me. We had actually a couple of therapists way before that, and we were discussing everyday problems. And sort of a thing that came out is that when like you put on scrubs, you're ready for work, so you're kind of protected. It's not the same as seeing things when you're not expecting them. But then some things find other routes, like if it's something from your life, from like in that instance, your daughter's car, etc. And it's kind of, since it's impossible to predict what you might encounter, that's actually in a way has sort of a back door to your psyche. It's kind of important to as much as possible not get too involved. Not like if it's not relevant for the case, maybe don't look at the deceased. If it's if it's not relevant, maybe leave it. And I think it's sound advice. And actually, like during the October 7th event, you'd be hearing a ton of horrible stories all around. And I made a deliberate attempt to kind of avoid them, which now that I'm here, maybe I have a poorer amount of stories that I can tell, but at least I'm sound. So I would recommend that.
It's a survival mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think you have to have that. And the two themes that strike me, not having experienced things like this, to watch your people, but also yourself. There's this, and it's especially I feel in our culture, you have to be strong. You have to just that's your job and but you can't help but be. It can't help but stick with you. So not just your people, but yourself, and do whatever you have to get the support you need. It's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah. So I love hearing that from you guys. Thank you. That's a tough question. Well, let's move on to the technology, and I'll just let you guys jump in. There have been so many innovations in DNA technology, and it certainly impacts mass fatality incidents. So if anyone wants to speak to that, something that has personally they've experienced or that.
Well, I think that, in the medical legal field, things haven't changed for a long time. And then when Rapid came along, it changed how we could really work with families and get them answers. I mean, not just yes, I'm going to bring this home for you, I'm going to make this identification, but the legal aspects. These people that have maybe a husband or wife that is not identified yet, but their income is gone because they're not working, but they're not identified. So you still have to make your mortgage. You still have to do all these things until they're identified and can continue on. So really bringing that to these families and saying, I'm going to help you quicker than I could have 10 years ago has been so wonderful. And really learning about FIG or IgG or whatever you want to call it, understanding how that works and incorporating it into our world has been just so wonderful.
Absolutely, I've heard many stories as we've gone along the last decade, and what it can do for people. I mean, we talk a lot about the technology in these videos, but it really is all for the person that you're serving.
It does. It comes down to the families. That's all it is. I mean, put aside whatever you think about technologies, whatever your experience has been, and put yourself in that family's shoes. And if you can give them a 100% correct ID quicker than you could before, it means the world to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, the rapid system, we have the rapid system in New York City, and I brought that for mass fatalities to use during a mass fatality event. And then might be a year or so that goes by, so I have to use this every month, otherwise it's going to sit on the shelf and it's going to be, no one's going to know how to use it. So we started doing regular missing person cases. You know, we had the reference samples. But that's a great piece of equipment for an average mass fatality, like 10 to 20. If you have a larger plane crash where there's fragmentation and you're talking hundreds of samples, our one piece of equipment is going to be slower than traditional methods because we can process so much through automation. So either we reach out to companies, vendors, and say, give me one of the national projects we're working on. Can I get like a whole bank of these rapids? Then I could set them up. Or we're going to do traditional methods, but maybe a little mixture. I like the idea of the rapid when the family comes to us, because my scientists are also interview specialists. They'll sit with the family and collect the DNA sample, and all the other traditional methods, the fingerprints, odontology, visual, if you can do that prior and you're sure you have the right answer, particularly with the non-scientific methods, let's do it, because the goal is identify them as quickly as possible and return them to their family. But if I can have someone meet with my team, and as we're interviewing, sometimes these interviews take 2 hours, and collect the sample off the bat, you explain the DNA process, and you have that done. So now I have a profile, and they're still here, and we already have DNA profiles from the remains, because we started those yesterday. I might be able to bring an ME in here, so they don't have to go home and wait for a phone call or a knock at the door. I might be able to do this right here, and we've been able to do that in some cases with the smaller ones. But we're still working out how to make this more efficient and work this into maybe a temporary mobile morgue someplace, because we're always like, oh, dirty bombs or nerve gas or chemicals. I don't want those samples brought into the lab. Let's do all the DNA work, and that's the post-mortem side of it is another area we're exploring. So it's exciting stuff. It's like all the other, you've seen the evolution in the last 20 years of DNA, and the techniques that we use today for the really old, worst of the worst World Trade Center samples. We need all hands on deck. You need NGS, you need MITO, you need YSTRs. You need a really good kinship program, because you're relative to go back with bone procedures. And the kits we have today, the commercial kits for generating, they're great. We had to develop our own back in the day, low copy number stuff. We don't have to do that anymore. We can use just your commercial kits are great for STRs. So you just watch all this stuff, and most of it just goes right over my head. And when I have team members now that are really into it, I'm like, keep finding us better procedures.
I love that. Well, the evolution, mixing it together, moving forward. I mean, so many moving parts for you guys. Wow. It's
One of the things that we did at the Family Assistance Center in Maui is that we put one of the rapid instruments there. So the families could actually give samples right there, and we could run the sample. We had a dedicated team that all they did was family reference samples, and the family could wait. You want to wait here for 2 hours? You want to go and have a haircut? Because you can get a haircut at the Family Assistance Center. Who knew? You could get food. I mean, there's all kind of things that they could get while they were there, and their sample would run, and we'd say, profile done.
Yeah.
You're good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's the other thing, not having to go back to that family. Can I get another swab?
I know.
Or can I get a, you don't want to, because you call them up or knock at the door.
Yeah. Yes. Oof. Would you guys like to weigh in on anything?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and knowing your resources, what you have available, so we have both rapid systems available. We do use it in routine casework, and we also have deployable, a plan to make them deployable, as Mark was saying. And it's going to depend on the incident, because, as he was pointing out, there is a limit to how many samples you can run, and then knowing, and that's what we've done with our agency, is knowing what our response could be given the number of, like, what MCI level it is, how many victims potentially you could have, and knowing when to call in backup, because it's too big for you to do, or it's going to overwhelm your actual laboratory. But in addition to that is looking for additional technologies. I spoke earlier on advancing our bone protocol. We didn't want to have to bring in liquid nitrogen to help process bones, so we found an alternative from another vendor. So, different things to look at it and kind of just keep looking what you might need, what is your capacity, and identifying that so you can be an informed person when someone calls you and said, okay, I can help you, but here's the limit of what I can do for you.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So we like to think of ourselves as a boutique lab, and we have a lot of advanced technologies, and we work on like a small lab and work on whatever is needed, and that makes us very special and gifted, but it also makes us not processing large amounts of samples at the same time, most of the time, which caught us very unprepared for October 7th events. So I'd say the largest change that we saw was in automation, and so much more samples could be processed without error at the same time. We don't have rapid yet. Usually we don't. Sometimes we'd get families for normal identification cases if it was saving them a very long trip to the police station. So we don't have rapid. Usually other methods suit us fine, but I'm starting to think it would be a very good idea. It would be amazing if you could put a sample on and something else will do all the work without needing you to babysit it while you do other important work like saving time. Paralleling things would be priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think that's important too. I mean, everybody's working within limitations, with the number of staff, where you're located, budget. Until something happens, sometimes you don't know what you need until, so sharing all this knowledge with each other can advance that, ahead of time when possible. Yeah, thank you. So we're just going to ask a few individual questions, and then we'll wrap up because you guys are probably getting hungry. You've really had a long. We're giving you such a long day. I'm so sorry. Mark, your role in the aftermath of the World Trade Center attacks. You talked a bit about it. I don't want to make you retread what you've already said, but can you discuss a little bit about how it shaped the protocols that you use today, or lessons learned for future, anything you might not have covered yet?
Lessons learned on the technical side, as far as the DNA,
Yeah,
the DNA
yeah.
lab, a lot about controlling the data. I mean, there was so much. I mean, to this day, our World Trade Center DNA data bank in New York City is larger than our local DNA index system, which is insane to think about because New York City is 8 million plus people. But controlling the data and the programs to integrate. It used to be all the departments had their own case numbers and had their own logbooks, and if you wanted to work with pathology versus toxicology versus the evidence unit or anthropology, everybody had their own thing going on. It just got so confusing on a daily basis with just a normal case. So now we have a case management system that was huge, that DNA people now have access to, and they can see, and the medical examiner can see the DNA results. All the reports are there. You've got the MLI work that was done, autopsy results, because it may be able to help the other. So something as simple as that, not creating a million different data banks, and we still have those in place, and that's a real nightmare with World Trade Center, because I have programs and sheets that the program that was used to run no longer exists, or Windows doesn't support it, and now I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And the 6,000 interviews that were done at the time, and 200 pieces of information that were collected from each of the stacks of paper. So we knew that sort of pushed us into, because we were always thinking about the LIMS system and go paperless, and that was a big factor for us, because if we had been multiple, even smaller mass fatalities, just to being able to control it and not get held up because of paperwork to release, and it's a travesty to families got to wait because of paperwork, or you think there was a mistake, or who did this. So that's all that part of it, the automation. I'm very happy with that. And of course, the DNA techniques are always evolving. One thing we did for 9/11 that we probably wouldn't do on any mass fatalities afterwards, the decision back in 2001 was to all these remains. We know that a lot of them we're not going to be able to get DNA from. Let's preserve them. So we took all the World Trade Center remains, we freeze dried them. We took all the moisture out, we sealed them. So that factor alone is why I still have a World Trade Center team, and we're still working on it. Because if we didn't do that, if we kind of just let them continue to decompose and degrade, there wouldn't be anything left at this point, most definitely. So that was just thinking back, like I never thought 23 years later we'd still be, but like that was such the right decision to make because we're still making IDs and to preserve those. But I don't think we've done that since because everything's been much smaller and the techniques we've gotten faster and we've been able to, and absolutely less fragmentation. I mean, that was a key to 22,000 remains. We have to identify each fragment in order for us to have any chance at identifying all the victims.
But really the forethought, to do that, and then as the technology evolves, I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
That was the medical examiner, that was the chief, that was Dr. Hirsch, was an MD. He's like, this DNA stuff, it's gotten better, because we had it, 89, we started the DNA lab, so 2001, we saw how that little 10 plus years, how far DNA technology became. He's like, it's going to continue. We're going to be doing stuff in 20 years that you see on TV, right? You see science fiction, and I'm like, yeah, we do. We do stuff today. Like I never thought this was possible way back when, but that decision to preserve, that was the right decision. Smart man.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's amazing to share all of this with a wider audience too. Like you said, so many people weren't actually around. They've been born since then, and maybe don't know the impact and how it changed things. Yeah.
Actually, one of my ex-colleagues, when I first got into work, she told them how we take for granted things that completely aren't, shouldn't be, and they went to a convention. It actually might have been Ishii, and someone was telling that they could produce a DNA profile from maybe touch, like from the handle of an X, and she and both are like, yeah. That was, nowadays it's expected, and investigators are angry if you, but we gave you the evidence, why can't you produce a profile? It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fascinating. Our last interview was about touch DNA, and it's just, it's mind-blowing. There's just new stuff every moment. Yeah. You did cover rapid DNA and IgG and how important that was in speeding things along. Anything else you'd like to say along those lines before we?
Well, I think that it's really important when you're going through these events, as we've done over the years and learned, is that you need to think about, every possibility of identification, multiple identifications in different modalities if you can. I was really big on let's get as many IDs as we can with as many different types of modalities. And if you're using rapid, that's wonderful, but if you're not getting an ID, think about going to genealogy. Don't use up all your sample. You may get a beautiful STR profile. I like to say it, just lovely, beautiful, the best. But if you don't have a family reference sample, it's not going to do you any good. So think about that. If you're not getting a hit on the ID and there's nothing wrong with your profile, you might have to switch over and maybe try genealogy. Maybe that's the DNA for you at this point. So keep that in mind. But I just can't say enough about how this has really helped the medical legal field. I remember sitting in my office calculating how fast I could retire in 2018 when we thought we didn't know anything about rapid. We had all these decedents coming in, and only 5 people had hands. We had all this great fingerprint technology, but it's not going to help you if nobody has a hand. So I really thought, I need to get out of here. I have messed up. And then Rapid came along, and we started making IDs, and I stopped thinking about retirement then. But you know, it's been really wonderful.
Thank you. That was an excellent addition. Julie, do you want to talk about preparedness? I mean, you know, how you came to begin the program and what encouraged that?
The stories that you're hearing today, and they're more than the stories, the experiences. So you can see something on the news and we all just take it as another news story, and then you talk to the individuals and you hear what they went through, and you self-reflect and you say, that could be me. And what am I going to do? What am I going to do if there's a Uvalde school shooting? What would I do in my laboratory? And so just starting those conversations, that's really where we started. And we, honestly, we started this conversation right before the Surfside condo collapse. We had collaborated with Marshall University. We were going to get an intern to help us really kind of just get a bolus of a plan. And we knew it was going to be constantly evolving. It's a living plan. And then Surfside happened, and thankfully, we actually had started the rapid journey. So we had one rapid already installed and functioning. We had two more just sitting in boxes. And Stephanie Stoloff down in Miami sent an officer up to pick them up. And we had to unbox them because the boxes wouldn't fit in the car. We put them in, we literally seatbelted them in the back of the car and went down. And then it became even more clear to us that this is something we need to take seriously, because it is a matter of when, not if this will happen. And it's hard, and I've spoken to the time that it takes out of your day-to-day, but you know, if not now, when? And you really need to make that time. And what I've discovered through this journey with my team is that there's a willingness and a passion behind this, because they see the value. They see everything that's happening on the news. They hear these talks, and they know it could be them. So they're doing this beyond their workday. They're coming up with their own ideas. And then now I have people from outside the DNA unit. Our quality assurance unit has gotten involved. Some of our fingerprint unit has gotten involved. And they want to, like, where am I going to fit into this puzzle should you need me? So it's really, I think the desire is out there. It just takes that single step to get you started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that willingness to get started and find those resources. Not always easy, but
No, but you got to do it.
you got to do it. Yeah, regardless. Adam, you talked a lot about you know, the evolving technology and things being dynamic. Anything more you'd want to talk about in that area before we wrap you up?
So I'm not sure it's applicable for every mass fatality event, but in our case, the work kept changing. We started thinking there's a certain number of individual dead and working on that. Then eventually, as it turned out, a much larger amount was dead. So rather than increase the work accordingly, it increased it incredibly, because we were under the impression that we had to entertain the scenario where an entire family might have been killed, and the person that's supposed to give the reference sample is not going to be able to give that. He's one of the victims, and if he was identified in any other means other than DNA, we'll never have his profile. So rather than just look for individuals that require DNA profiling, everyone had to go through DNA profiling. So in that instance, in our lab, all of a sudden we really needed a lot more equipment, a lot more reagents. And you're not prepared for that. I was ordering the amount that I thought might have been insufficient. Now I need a lot more of that. Then later on, it turned out that we need to. There was a fear that some of the Israelis that we were looking for, the missing Israelis, like we are going through, and maybe 90% were identified, but we're still missing maybe 10%. Maybe they are among the dead Gazan militants in the October 7th events, which weren't our responsibility strictly, and we couldn't identify them anyway. We didn't have the reference samples, but maybe they're there. Now we're going to look into corpses that are in suboptimal conditions, and now we need to work a lot with bones. We barely did bones up until then. Now we need to order a whole new set of reagents, and our workload just redoubled again. So it was a very dynamic kind of work with the finishing line was kept being taken away from us. And maybe it's something to take into account. Again, I'm sort of asking to be prepared for the unprepared, but it's a thing that happened and might occur.
Being prepared for the unprepared, that's really what the panel and this discussion is about, and that is not easy. Any small piece of parting advice that you would give before we wrap up for you guys that we haven't covered? Or you'd just like to reiterate for everyone?
Just do it.
Just do it, okay.
Don't panic. There's plenty of people out there that can help, and it's not as bad as it seems.
Good advice.
Yeah, this can become the reason, you get involved, and we never expect it, but you can get involved in one of these events, and it can lead to you can get more involved as a scientist. I never thought on the political side of it, how much, or the management, or the executive, but now you see firsthand, you're in the trenches, and how do we make this system better? And it just leads to, for me, it just led to so many different things with my career that I never thought would ever happen. Say if, I was building fell on me and I got injured and I couldn't go back to ground zero to work, so they put me to work with families and these DNA technology, and that was a big turning point. So you never know what's going to happen, but you go with it, you make the best, and you try your hardest to do your job.
Absolutely.
For us, I'd say we got a ton of volunteers asking to help in all sorts of ways, and for our lab we got actual professional lab workers who knew the job, the work that they could do PCR as well as I could. Some of them were lab managers, so more than that. And it was difficult psychologically to let a lot of new people into your clean forensic lab, but maybe a message here is that it is possibly essential. Not possibly, it would have been impossible to do the work without them. So let those people in if they want to help through. Put your limits. Don't bring anyone. You got support and use it.
I think that's a theme we've definitely seen here: support and sharing and working together. And thank you not only for sharing this with us, but for what you all do. It is really remarkable. It seems silly to move to this question at this point, but I know a lot of you have attended Ishi before. Some may be new, but it's our 35th anniversary, and we just would love to hear what it's like for you, what brings you back, and does it help you? Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Start off with that.
I didn't do anything to do, but thank you.
What I say to that is there's not enough medical legal people that come to this. When I ask agencies if they know about it, they don't. And it's really important that they learn from other agencies that have a different viewpoint. Like Julie was saying, answered a question earlier about a missing persons case. She totally looks at something differently than I do. And I didn't realize that. And when she said it, I thought, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I think of it in respect to what we do in our field. And it's a totally different thing. And there are two people here right now, because I told them last year you should go to this, and they're here. And I really think that more medical legal people should come. I think this is a great conference. It's always at a great venue. The staff are awesome. It's all well organized. So that would be my advice to get more people in, is maybe open it up to the medical legal agencies. Let them know what's going on. They don't know.
Well, thank you for bringing 2 people in that area, and yeah,
I could bring more.
We definitely, well, please do, but we definitely, you're right. Like, we need a track that also addresses that, and again, community sharing, learning from each other. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's stellar conference and organization, and I've been, my 27 years, I've been to these all over the world, and this is top tier, and I've made so many contacts and developed relationships, and don't very often for me now, like, take notes, like, this is a good technique, and I see some of the, for me, bring it back to my team, or I don't always, like every year, I'm like, I gotta send, because we can't send to everybody, I'm like, someone else should go to this and learn what I learned, you know, especially as I'm looking at the end of my career, but just that, this has always been, ISHE has always been a place where I've learned, I've made, developed relationships, and also I've seen a lot, like we call it the New York City alumni, because there's probably 50 people here that I've worked with over the years that are the other 197 DNA crime labs that are in the United States. But one thing that someone pointed out to me, and it was the last time that I spoke here, we were on the topic of the psychological effects in counseling, and he said, you know, I think for you that your counseling is the fact that you talk about this and you tell people the story. When you do, it makes you feel better. And I thought, I'm like, you know what, he's right. He's absolutely, and I get put on TV a lot, and I think about that, you know, when I tell that story, this time, especially September, the anniversary, you just like, it's sort of like therapy, you get to talk about it, and it just kind of, you know, sometimes it gets emotional, and one of the caveats is, I don't know, I'm probably going to laugh during part of it, you know, cry, get emotional, but, you know, it's definitely, for me, like, being able to talk about that, and not just 9/11, but all the other stuff, yeah, it's something that, yeah, I agree with that, what he said the last time I spoke at ISHE. Like, yeah, you're right, the counseling for me, getting up and talking about the content and sharing it, and have people like, that's such a great, can I get your card, you know, it just happened just now afterwards, and I know there's emails waiting for me, and, you know, with this team, I know we'll keep in touch and bounce things off of each other, no doubt. So thank you.
No, thank you. That's something that I've never heard of in any of our videos, and I love that perspective. That, yeah, getting a chance to talk about it as counseling as well. I mean, I think that's thank you.
Just to kind of build upon that, I do see ISHE as a bit of a therapy session, because we all come to share things, and when you come to find you have shared experiences, or you're able to talk about something that was really difficult, and get the support of the community, it's a very valuable experience. But I will say, I'm going to steal a phrase that Tom Callahan said on the opening night, the welcome reception for ISHE 35, which was, ISHE is professional Christmas. And I really enjoyed that, because I look forward to this meeting all year, almost like I do Christmas. And there's just so much, you know, it's like family, food, drink, friends, you know, the whole thing comes together. And when he said that, I was like, wow, how long did you think about that before you said that? But I'm going to steal it, because it's such a wonderful description of what ISHE actually means to me as well. And like Mark said, you can't send everybody, and I try not to be too selfish with this meeting. So by participating in panels like this, I'm able to help offset that and send more people to ISHE. And of course, ISHE next year is in Palm Beach.
Yeah.
So ISHE 36 is in Palm Beach, which is literally 15 minutes from our laboratory. So I hope to send almost all of my staff. Someone's got to stay behind, but yes.
I think that would be fantastic, and yes, the Christmas is what a beautiful,
Yes, professional Christmas.
Yeah. I love seeing everyone get together and have a great time. It is, it's so enjoyable for me too. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts so far?
First ISHE, right?
Yeah, so this is my first issue.
So we just, I know we're putting you on the spot, but since it's Wednesday, how's it been?
Well, yeah, so I think I'm still a bit awestruck this is a large thing for me, and so far I don't know that many people. I hope to. Like already, I met a few. I want to say next issue for sure it'll be fun, but the prospects of me being allowed to fly again, it'll be my turn to sit back, probably for a while. But I hope the issue where I will be able to make it, I'll still meet old friends, and yeah, it's like this is important. This should definitely be a regular thing for our lab to send people into. There's always a matter of funds and being able to afford the manpower, but it's important to stay at the front line of knowledge, to keep up to date to technology, and I hope you'll see more of us in the future.
I hope so too. And if we can help get you on any panels or do some interviews to make it easier, just let me know. We'll figure it out. We want all of you guys here. Thank you so much for taking this time. We really appreciate it. This is really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.